Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Ethics TV. And for those of you who've watched this show before, or maybe even the Academy of Advanced Thought beforehand, or the Thought Expansion Network even before then, you may notice this person here sitting next to me, although being the other side of the world, and Prashant. And so he and I have had many conversations. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of the Socratic method and the application of that in education and society in general. And so for those of you who are aware of what Socratic method is, or Socratic questioning as it may be known, I'm going to give you a quick 60-second rundown if I possibly can. So it's named after Socrates, who was one of the founders of Western philosophy, and born in 470 BC, died 399 BC, seen as a heretic by the commanders-in-chief at the time for undermining the respected intellectuals by highlighting contradictions in their belief and paraphrasing, poisoning the younger generation. Was then found through a democratic vote, which we'll get to later in this conversation, his view on democracy, found by a democratic vote of 500 Athenians, if I remember correctly, to actually be guilty, and then died of hemlock. And for the thinking person, that is ostensibly as significant in history as the crucifixion and choose your poison. But essentially, what the Socratic method was, of which Plato was arguably one of the greatest scholars and reporters of this, was a method of being able to probe thinking to distinguish what is known and understood from what is not known and not understood. Now, my view of that is that it is all to arrive at a state of aporia. And a state of aporia, in using those Athenian terms, is a state of puzzlement. In other words, at least understanding what we know we don't know. And my perhaps less scholastic view of this is that and this isn't historically true necessarily, but my observation, I've been looking into this stuff for like 40 plus years. I think that what happened is that when Socrates was heralded as being the most wise person of that time, I think that profoundly shocked him. And the evidence of that is his last words that are reported were that the unexamined life is not worth living, and the one thing only I know is that I know nothing. And so I think the profound shock of being known as wise, many years before he died, brought about a mission that he was on that was constantly questioning the people who thought that they knew stuff. So priests, emperors, people who are seen as intellectuals, he would ask them questions. And the method he tended to raise to ask those questions were to listen extraordinarily carefully to what the other person's argument structure was, and then ask for definitions of that structure, to probe deeper through questioning, and then reformulate the argumentative structure that they were presenting. And then establishing from largely, almost always, what the set of assumptions were in their original argument structure, what was actually known, which tended to be very little, versus what was actually still a giant assumption or question, which tended to be a lot. And I think he did that until he upset the wrong people enough, and then my view was sentenced to death because of it. So anyway, there's the Jonathan MacDonald version of Socrates' life and the Socratic method, butchered shamelessly by my lack of intellectual wisdom on it itself. But so Prashant mentioned to me a couple of days ago that we should potentially discuss the Socratic method and discuss how that could be placed into the education system, let's say, and or society. And so, anyone could argue from what I've just said that questioning and the establishment of critical thinking could enable the distinguishment between what people know and understand from what they don't know and don't understand, but also fostering the ability to question ourselves and to question others, and to enable the flattening of a hierarchy where the teachers apparently know everything and we know nothing, and the bosses apparently know everything and we know nothing. So actually, real wisdom is knowing that, there's 1% of stuff we know, 1% of stuff we know, we don't know, and 98% of stuff we don't know. And one of the reasons why I have no set religion is due to my entire and profound and overwhelming understanding of the 98% of what I don't know. By day, that 98% fills itself more and more and more and more and more, and I become even more aware of the vast chasm that is the 98% of what I don't know. Anyway, so that's where we are. Prashant, why did you raise this as a topic to me? What was the genesis of that thought? From all the things we could discuss, what is so important about this?
So, well, there's a bit of a story. I downloaded ChatGPT and started asking it questions, and then I started picking its brains and asking, and found how it was stuttering, and that kind of thing. So, for example, questions like, "Oh, is this word a medieval Latin word or a classical Latin word?" And if so, how do we know? How can we say for sure? Because classical Latin is a reconstructed language. It's not. We don't. The only written Latin we have for the most part is through medieval manuscripts. So basically, classical Latin has been reconstructed on the basis of inscriptions. And then, while playing games like this with ChatGPT, I thought this would be a really cool app. If, for example, if you could get an app, an AI-powered app that could go Socratic on anyone who's using it, that could go complete full-on Socratic, and an app that adapted as people started expressing their opinions. Oh, but you said this, and I just thought, generally speaking, I've always thought that, there's a lot of difficult philosophy out there, but the works of Plato and Socrates are not difficult. They're extremely accessible, and the Socratic method is a very accessible and elegant approach to critical thinking, I think. And it's the sort of thing which I think, it could be a key tool in building up a sense of citizenship, a civic sense, plus a sense of individuality, because we live in a time where there's so much information thrown at us. There's so much, most people are completely rattled, I think. They're confused. We live in an age of where people are rattled and confused, and I think there's never been an age where there's been so much paradox as our age, where there's so many people who think they know everything. So and I think kind of reintroducing reintroducing the Socratic method into the collective consciousness would I think be a good step towards some sort of humanism, getting back to some sort of humanism. So that's why.
Well, obviously, for full transparency, being the founder of a ethical AI firm called Self, my view is that when there is a module for Self, which is a private version of ChatGPT, but is actually a filter to the entire web and a future operating system, I think that you will be the senior advisor for the Socratic module that goes on top. So I'm putting that out there on the day of this moment in time, depending on your time zone, is something between the 25th and 26th of February. So I'm going to put that out there for aspirational future.
I'd love to be part of something like that.
You will be. I think that's. I know that's what's going to happen. So I'm putting it out there for the record. But what I found that was salient from what you said, one of the list of salience things that you've mentioned was our current desire for certainty. And it echoes of what someone called Ward Farnsworth wrote in the book The Socratic Method, which is vital reading for anyone who is arriving at this subject with some form of interest. And Ward Farnsworth said that to the point that you've mentioned, is that Socratic method means asking hard questions without fear, and receiving them without offense. Which is a two-headed thing there. So it's asking hard questions without fear of retribution and receiving questions without being offended. And then he says something like, and I'm paraphrasing, and my level of accuracy with paraphrasing is 50-50. He says something like, it means that treating challenge and refutation as acts of friendship.
Right.
And I love that statement.
Well, I mean, you look at Socrates' personality. He's so gently made his interlocutors look really foolish, but without in a not very malevolent way. I mean, when you even right from the beginning of the Republic, we get the whole notion of the nature of justice and this whole conversation that goes on. And so I suppose it would be something akin to, you see this massive monolithic structure in front of you that seems rigid and hard, and you just try and poke it gently at its weakest point in a way and make it collapse.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the one of the things that I've enjoyed about asking questions in a way to understand is that partly that the art is in finding a structure, finding the parts of the structure that are, let's say, weaker, which tend to be the assumptive parts. That's the sport of it. But the pursuit is predominantly in finding an agreement in some extent that there are certain things that we collectively don't know. And so when we can find a collective not knowingness, that I believe is directly proportional to a collective wisdom. Where I think wisdom falls apart is when one or more parties are completely certain about something that isn't so. And that's what I mean. I've said this on several Ethics TV episodes, that Mark Twain said that, it's not knowing something that it's not the not knowing something that gets you into trouble. It's the knowing something for sure that just isn't so that gets you into trouble. And so I find that there is some form of I think that this is from I think it was John Stuart Mill, and the best collection of John Mill's work is probably called The Collected Works. And there's a wonderful phrase inside that which speaks to he says it a lot better than I've just said, which is that something about it's the acceptance of traditional opinions and current sentiments as ultimate fact. So the way that we just currently think about stuff and the current sentiment is absolutely true. And bandying the abstract terms which express what he says, approbation or disapprobation, desire and aversion, admiration, disgust, as if they had a meaning thoroughly understood and universally assented to. So that's what John Stuart Mill said was the issue, and I could not agree more. In fact, the red flag for me in any form of discussion is when someone is 100% certain about something that immediately concerns me, because that as soon as we become 100% certain, we stop the ability to learn anything more. And it's, without being too hyperbolic, not dissimilar to deciding to stop breathing in terms of our thought process. So that's what I think. What's your view?
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, in this day and age, it's not such a rarity to find people who are certain about things. It's yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I think, I think the beautiful thing about the Socratic method is that it, without humiliating you, takes you to that state of blissful ignorance from where you can start the questioning and the discovery and the curiosity and the things that make us rich, so that make our lives rich.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's I can go down so many different rabbit holes in this one. So because I've thought about this for 4 decades. So I'm trying to pick the rabbit hole to go down. So okay, the one I'm going to go down is this. So I have some warmer topic matters that I've really thought through more than others. So the one I'm going to pick one of those. Where have you got to in your thinking as to why Socrates was admonished so much by the powers that be? What is the risk in what he was doing what you would say? I mean, I foolishly off the cuff at the beginning of this piece said that it kind of upsets the intellectuals because it kind of puts them under question. But do you feel what is the issue with the Socratic method in general, or specifically to him? What's the problem? Why doesn't everyone apply these type of ways of seeking understanding of what we don't know?
Well, because I think it threatens the managerial class of the time. In the managerial class of Socrates' time, the managerial class of our time. There's these you were right about there's a whole bunch. There are whole power structures out there that want to control by establishing a sense of certainty. And right now there's the left versus right thing, where both groups are trying to do exactly the same thing in a different way. And I've always thought that if you put someone who's on the far left, if you put them in a lift, if they ended up getting trapped in a lift together, they'd probably emerge hand in hand and kissing, because they find that they've got so much in common. So I think so. There's, but I think that the reason these extremes are so powerful, the simplistic thinking is so powerful, because in every age there's typically been a managerial class that promotes this sort of thinking, and you see it in education as well. It's like you see it everywhere, all and the sort of technocratic class, the managerial class, call it whatever you will. People always talk about the billionaires or whatever, but no one talks about how responsible the managerial class is for for what's going on at the ground level. Yeah,
I think that's where I've got to at the moment, and I have a colouring in of that I've arrived at the moment. Again, prefixed or caveated with the fact that this is only where I've got to currently with my thinking, and I reserve the right to be completely hypocritical in times in the future, because this is where I've got to as of 2025, specifically February 2025. So March 2025, it might be completely different. Where I've got to is interestingly in line with what Socrates' issue with democracy was. So Socrates was against democracy because, and one of the in Plato's Republic, there's I'm going to really butcher this particular analogy. There's a story about Socrates speaking to a wise, a theoretically wise intellectual. And the wise intellectual said, so what's the problem that you've got with democracy? Why, one of the greatest inventions that we've got here, sure, you're talking about thinking about things and philosophy. However, we've created a way that, that the entire public can have a say. And he said, okay, let's say you've got a ship, you've got a boat, a sailing ship, and a very technical sailing ship. Who do you want to make decisions about the mechanics of that ship? Do you want people who are super trained sailors, or do you want general public? And the wise person said, super trained sailors. And Socrates said, well, that's exactly the reason why it's not always a good idea to construct a mechanism, a consortium mechanism of people, unless there is an educated base inside that public. And if there's an educated base in the public, then there can be a considered reason. I think Winston Churchill probably said it best when he said that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. And so, but I think this is where things stem from, because the ultimate reason why Socrates was concerned about democracy was not about giving people votes. That's not what his point was. What his point was actually about the creation of demagoguery. And demagoguery is interestingly not really taught either. But as I describe it now for the passing listeners or viewers, you may recognize it in our life, not least the fact that we think we're in a democracy. So a demagogue is a political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than using rational argument. So that's the noun. And therefore the verb, if that wasn't obvious enough, is that the verb of a demagogue is to rhetorically exploit an issue for political purposes in a way that is calculated to appeal to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people. So what Socrates' concern was that democracy eventually becomes a demagoguery. That's the concern. That's his actual concern from reading all of the writings from Plato about this time. And I think that the inherent drive towards a demagoguery is not only absolute. I would attest to say right now, at this time of my thinking about it, we are not living in a democracy in most cases. We're living in a demagoguery. And a demagoguery is weaponization of information that leans into biases of people, such as let's make people scared about this particular virus. Let's make people scared about people with brown skin. Let's make people scared about people who wear turbans. Let's make people scared about foreigners. Let's make people angry about this person. Let's say that this person, this politician, let's all hate her or him because of what they've done in their private life. And what that's doing, that populism is the absolute opposite of a democracy. So that's why I think that what Socrates was mostly murdered for was less to the questioning of theoretically wise and controlling people, and more of what he was actually outlining was that what you've done is you've utilized democracy to fool people into thinking they've got a say, and in that fooling you're actually a demagoguery, but under the guise of a democracy, and therefore you're a fraud. And I think that had to be shut down. I think that was the end. They were like, you're out, mate. You're done.
But I mean, I think could we probably extend the definition of a demagogue to not just individuals, but groups, oligarchical demagoguery, for example. It's whole groups of people manipulating you. So you've got people on the right talking about Western civilization under threat and all those good old points. And then people on the left going the other way, saying, "Oh, the Nazis are coming," or that kind of thing. And so both counters, David. And I mean, in my point of view, both points of view are irresponsible and irrational. And I think this in this age, there's various demagogueries. I think there's layers of demagogueries upon demagoguery going on.
Yeah, there is, and I fear that that one of the I hasten to almost say it, but when things can go very wrong if you look, I'm just literally looking at the last 2,000-3,000 years of history, and I'm not assessing that the next 2,000 or 3,000 years are similar, but history doesn't necessarily repeat, but it certainly rhymes. Where things go really wrong is when people think that there is a savior that has arrived in a particular president, a particular leader of some sort, and now everything's going to be okay. And then there's the two things happen. One is that there is a mass formation psychosis that blindly believes that the new entrant, the new leader, whatever it is, the new North Star, has got all the answers, everything is going to be okay. And because of that blind faith, lots of stuff can get slipped under that no one questions, because blind faith, as one of the parts of the book, The Socratic Method, says, I think something in the region of, in the natural process of growth in the human mind, belief does not follow proof, but springs up apart from and independent of it. An immature intelligence believes first and proves, if indeed it ever seeks proof, afterwards. And so when there is blind faith into a savior that has now been voted in, or has now been structured as a theism that we can follow, we stop thinking critically. And then the second thing happens is that the damage that is compounded due to the lack of questioning is almost irreversible. But when the tragedy is that when those that believed realize their belief was false, stuff goes really gnarly. And there's a great movie called independent film called Kumare, where this reporter pretends to be a spiritual guru and convinces a whole load of people around the country to follow him. And at the end, he fesses up and says, "Hey, listen, actually, I'm not a spiritual guru that you've been following for 2 years and seeing this blue light that I've told you that you can see." And people have gone, "I can see the blue light." I'm not actually. I'm a documentary maker. I'm making a film about things we believe. You had a range of absolute anger, existential threats of people whose identity had been wedded to this thing that had then been pulled apart. So you've got mass depression, existential thing. But interestingly, there was a bunch of people at the end of Kumare, Kumare, who still believed after he had said that he was a false prophet. They still said, I'm worship you. I still fully believe.
Right.
And that's the ultimate tragedy, is the false belief that is then revealed to be false, that is still believed, is like a different level of hell, I think.
Yeah, I think though we've spoken about the hoi polloi and the demagogues at the top. But what about the educated class? I mean, the educated class have their own set of ignorance as well. especially in this day and age.
And actually, I don't view the lack of critical thinking to be a disease of the working or the upper or any other class. I think that this is I don't know what obviously in politics it would be bipartisan. I don't know what the class, it's agnostic of class. I think the lack of critical, and in fact, I've seen it as equally amongst the, I love your usage of hoi polloi, by the way. I love the classical usage of hoi polloi.
Exactly.
It's like using the proletariat in the correct Orwellian term.
Right.
I think that the lack of, when in the higher classes of society, it is just as equally valid to not question structures, and as it is if you're a factory worker. Both ends of society have risk associated if you start saying that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes, or why does the emperor say that he is wearing clothes when he's not, which would be the Socratic way of saying the emperor's not wearing clothes.
Exactly. I mean, and look at how easily, for example, someone who's educated will automatically cite something that's been brought out by a university think tank as though it's an absolute truth, or it's like, oh, I'm not going to. It came out from Harvard University published this, so it's got to be true. And there's that kind of thinking. So I mean, that's the sort of middle. In fact, I would say it's probably far more dangerous with the educated class because they've been trained to conform in a way.
Yes. But okay, let's apply a Socratic question to that rather than just what I was going to say was, why would you say that it is more dangerous for the educated class? What greater danger is there?
Well, because to begin with, they are in a position to serve the interests of the demagogues and the people on top. They are in a position to spread the narrative. They are because they occupy the dangerous middle position. And
so arguably, so what we're saying is that in the gatekeeper role of those that are able to influence, but those that have a role in society that is influential enough, the danger is there, and it is in their ability to influence and be influenced that the danger lives within. Whereas arguably, let's look the counter of that, which is if the lowest class is not thinking critically, the danger of not thinking critically is perhaps a survival risk because they aren't seeing potential solutions. But there is no hierarchical influence they can have over people beneath them due to the fact they are at the lowest rung.
Right, exactly.
That makes sense. I think that my observations of the lack of critical thought used to be that, and this is a terrible way, my suboptimal way of thinking in the past was, and this is when I was growing up, was that thinking was hard. Therefore, that's why people didn't do it. And I think that's almost, well, it's not almost, it's an extraordinarily patronizing viewpoint. Oh, they're there, it's hard, therefore you shouldn't do it. Whereas I've now come to the thought that there is a greater risk. There is more to lose. The higher up the rungs, the higher up the ladder you go, the greater the fall. If you are to start questioning the structure of the ladder and in fact the validity of the ladder, and worse, that this ladder is against a wall that you've told us that we're meant to get to the top of, But I've heard reports that there's nothing over the other side of the wall, and this is Plato's caves all over again. This is where they are looking at a wall, shadows of guards that have shackled them to the wall in the cave, and the allegory says that, you know, even one that can break free and go outside and see the glorious nature of it all, the glorious beauty of it all, and then come back and say to the slaves, guys, there's no prison guards. This is flickering flames of a fire. We're inside a cave and outside is absolute beauty. And they chastise the reporter of that.
Yeah.
They go against the reporter of that. They're like, no, you've lost your mind. These are prison guards. We can see the reflections on the wall. And that's kind of the same thing. And if you go up the ladder high enough and you've got a 14-meter drop down to where you came from, and you might even know for sure that the other side of the wall is nothingness, or in this case, to mix metaphors, outside of the cave is beautiful, glorious nature. But if you question that and you get torn to pieces by the rest of the slaves, would it not be better to just remain on the ladder going upward?
Yeah,
that's what I've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are caught up at the level of instinct. I think that's part of the think very instinctually, and they gravitate towards the place that give them comfort. So the educated classes gravitate towards the academic institutions. But now, you know, there's been a lot about academic institutions also creating citation loops and only now promoting certain narratives over others, and not really, you know, allowing free thought like they used to. So, but if you went to university, well, Harvard or Stanford said it, so it must be true, especially where especially in non-STEM subjects.
Yeah. Well, and let's catastrophize that point even more so when we class a podcaster as saying something, therefore it must be true. So it's one thing to state an Ivy League university, and it's another thing to say that you heard it on a podcast on Spotify, therefore it's true, which is like, I'm amazed that we've arrived into that level of information.
I mean, in India, there's this phenomenon called WhatsApp University. And, you know, it's just people send things to other people on WhatsApp and people get riled up by that, and, you know, that sort of thing.
I didn't know about this. So is it officially called WhatsApp University, or is that the colloquialism?
That's a colloquialism, but everyone calls it, you know, oh, you just heard that on WhatsApp University. And, you know, it's basically gossip, but it's known as WhatsApp University.
Okay, I can see that. And it's I think another offhand remark that people make in the dog park I go to is, it must be true because I read it on the internet. And people now say it as a, you know, it must be true because I read it on the internet, as a laugh. But it's interesting that they're saying it. They say that immediately after stating something as being true because they read it on the internet. And that this is almost this is a metaphysical kind of construct where you laughingly, there's an African saying which is, it is what it is what is created, you are the creator. And what has happened over time, and especially in the Western world, is we've taken the first line of that, which is it is what it is, and removed the rest of the context. Now, the context from the African context is, it is what it is. It is what is created. And by the way, you're the creator. Therefore, whatever it is, you are the master of. That's the point of the African statement, right? Whereas what we've done in the Western world is we've just taken the first one as an absolution of to absolve us from any form of accountability. Oh, it is what it is. And that kills me, because it's like, that's the exact opposite of what it is means. And I feel the same with I must be true because I read it on the internet. It's like, no. This therefore means that you shouldn't assume that it's true because you read it on the internet. You don't say it as a badge of honor. You say it as a word of warning to yourself.
Well,
No?
I mean, even if you read something in an academic journal or whatever, you need to read two or three other articles to get counterpoints and that sort of thing. I mean, you can't just take things at face value. I think at the core of it is, I think there's an impulse that's built up, and I think this might be the result of consumerism, or it could be just a general result of a loss of meaning in our world due to the collapse of religion or whatever. But I think we live in an age that equates information with knowledge, rather than kind of looking at knowledge as, a dialogue of sorts, or the journey towards knowledge being a dialogue of sorts. And but we think that in order to be knowledgeable, we need to consume loads of information.
Yeah.
We just need to. I think that's part of the problem, and that's what we go towards: information. And then, of course, we end up going towards the sources of information that feed our biases and don't offer a counterpoint.
Yeah, and well, your point is very supportive of the Socratic method. I mean, the counterpoint part is one of the methodologies, and I should have maybe started with this, but now for anyone who's listening to this and going and just wondering for an example of the Socratic method. So when I have to speak about the Socratic method to people, and this will support what you've just said, Prashant, in terms of offering counterpoints and multiple opinions, is I have a 6-step model, my version of this, which is kind of I guess one of the most common versions, whatever. The first thing I do in a conversation is I ask the other person to clarify what their actual thought is, and then I listen using the ears and mouth in that ratio. So I listen to what their whole point is without judgment or bias. If I ask any questions, it's like, can you explain what you mean by that more? Or why did you say that bit? Can I just exactly understand that? So that's number one. Secondly, is I then try and distill from what I've listened to and understood as much as I can. And if I haven't, I keep going on number one to ask the questions, is identify which of those things are assumptions. So I ask, you mentioned this, but is that always the case? Or why do you think that if you ever are you assuming this, does that assumption hold in all cases, and so forth? And that leads perfectly to number 3, which is I then ask for evidence for the basis of any argument. So for instance, is there anything that would back that up? What citations have you used? Is there any reason to doubt that evidence? How many authors have actually cited that and cross-matched that, and so forth? That's number 3, evidence for arguments. Number 4 is seeing if there's any form of counter argument, which is Prashant's point of the counterpoint. So discovering alternative viewpoints and perspectives or conflicts between the contention. So what's the counter argument to that? Could anyone ever see this in a different way? Is it possible for anyone to have a different point of view? Has any scientist found anything contrary to this? And then number 5 is looking at what the consequences are or the implications are of what is being said. So if this is the case, what happens as a result? Or how does this affect that? Or if this happens in one part of society, does it have an impact here? If this doesn't happen in education, what's the outcome of that? And then number 6 is questioning the questions. So when we had this conversation, why do you think that I asked the question that I asked about that assumption? Or which of the questions that I asked was the most important, do you feel, in your understanding? And which of your points turned out to be the most supportive of what you were saying? And which of your points turned out to be the least supportive? That even as you said your points, which parts did you feel were the weakest versus the strongest? Now, that approach, those 6, throughout my life of attempting to be a good scholar of Socrates and Plato, his student, I've basically, that's the method that I've used to the most effect. And what I mean by most effect is understanding as much as humanly possible about what I don't know, and understanding that I've increased my 98% of what I don't know. That's what a good outcome looks like. Not that I can now say, oh, I completely understand this, because as I said at the beginning, that's the reddest of red flags. In fact, you've stopped learning as soon as you've come up with the absolute answer. That's the last thing that you want to do. What's your view, Prashant?
I mean, they say that ignorance is bliss, but I would change that somewhat. I say knowing your own ignorance is bliss, because it takes a load off your chest and your shoulders, and you're suddenly, you're light and childlike and able to discover.
Yes, I agree. I think that we could argue that ignorance is almost an umbrella term for other things, like, for instance, lack of bias or lack of preference.
Yes.
The Buddha says that it is I think it's the second of the teachings, is to disassociate ourselves from the desire or the application of preference. I like this, I don't like this. This feels comfortable, this does not feel comfortable. And our ability to remove ourselves either temporarily or permanently from that place of desire is a truly blissful state. And anyone who's practiced any form of mindfulness or meditation or yoga or pranayama may have arrived at a moment where you have gone beyond thinking, oh, I'm bored, I'm lying down in a church hall on Tuesday night in the freezing cold, or this move, Trikonasana, I can't seem to get my chest facing as far in the correct direction. It's always kind of bending around towards the floor where it needs to be. And when you move away from that and you actually allow the breath to be the mover of your body, and you're the silent observer, you can then, if one is fortunate enough, arrive at what the point is around that bliss. That it is the thing that stops us being truly, and I mean truly, at peace, is our overwhelming desire for gain or happiness or thrill or preference or comfort zone. All of these things, all of them, and all material stuff, whatever, but all of that is the stuff in the way. And that's a profound point. And I think one of your points of enabling your ignorance to be blissful is a fairly stoic statement, which is the thing that isn't blissful is being absolutely determined to be the smartest person in the room. I want to be the least smart person in the room. I'm absolutely determined to walk into the room as a 6-year-old in my brain and go, teach me stuff. That's blissful. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, the dog's got an opinion on that quite clearly. Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, I think I was one of the tribe that, used to just blindly identify as a political liberal, thinking it amounted to some sort of absolute virtue. And I think the last 5 or 6 years, the waters have been muddied up. It doesn't mean I've gone off political conservatism, but I've just decided in my mind something, humanism, getting away from political thinking. Politics is not an avenue through which you can make a better world. In fact, that's where I've come at. And a lot of people seem to think that the solution to our problems is a political solution. That's not. This is dangerous thinking. This is what's known as dangerous thinking, I think.
I have to have full cards on the table and wholeheartedly agree. And I think that the next few years will, for anyone who wants to observe the next 48 months, will see an example of what your point means. And this isn't to be partisan in any way. I personally couldn't really care who's the leader of one country or another country, the country I'm in or the country you're in or whatever. I don't believe that I'm so wholeheartedly of the mindset that our solutions won't come from people who have intentionally run for power to gain power.
Exactly.
Billy Connolly said that the initial desire to be the prime minister or president should immediately disqualify that person from being it, and that's my view.
Yes. Well, there's a paradox, right?
Yes, and you know what? It's a shame because I met David Miliband, MP. I think he's MEP, member of the European Parliament. He was of course, he is the brother of Ed Miliband, who was the Prime Minister in the UK. But David Miliband, his brother, who I met several times when he was working in the Home Office in the UK. I met him, and I genuinely felt that he wanted to make a difference in politics. He, you know, we have a similar background for one reason or another. We have, you know, there's stuff in his past and stuff in my past that has some resonance, and so maybe I was slightly more biased towards listening to him because I felt a kindred spirit. We worked on a piece called the Music Manifesto that enabled music to be offered in the British education system without without expense of another subject. So before what we did together, if you wanted to take a music subject, you had to drop a science. And we were like, no, you can't disable someone's scientific understanding because of music. That's just like, come on.
Right, exactly.
You know, yeah. Do you want to let's talk about culture. But anyway, so he and I we were part of a big team who created the Music Manifesto, and it worked, right? So it was one of the most proudest things I've been involved with. And so I met him, and I was like, this guy, I'd vote for this guy. And he was like, I don't want to be prime minister. That's not what I don't want to do that stuff. No, don't make me do it. My brother, however, is, but I want to be behind the scenes and I want to get shit done. I want to affect change. The last thing I'm going to do is become a pen pusher at the top who has to sign autographs outside supermarkets.
I mean, because it's ultimately the Humphrey Applebys who run the country at the end of the day. I mean,
Yes, Minister.
Oh yeah, that show never ages. I don't think that's
when one of my guilty pleasures. I've never admitted this to anyone. Although even as I say this, I feel as if you and I have somehow spoken about this once or twice before. But one of my guilty pleasures is before I take a long haul flight, I download Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister as an offline on my phone, and that I can do I can do a long haul 5 continent time zone flight with that I'm done.
I think for me the classic episode is the one where they're in a Middle Eastern country. That's so funny that particular episode, and they're all trying to drink. They're trying to consume alcohol, and that all.
I think what I think is so tragic is that that it is. As I got older, because obviously that was I kind of guess came out in my childhood, or at least young, mid-teens, young teens, whatever. As I grew older and I met the people who are in the actual real life positions, it turns out that it's actually basically a documentary. So so I didn't realize that it's all true,
Well, no, it absolutely is, and that's why we were talking about extending the definition of demagoguery. You don't just look at the Trumps of the world or whatever as demagogues. You also look at the Humphrey Applebys of the world as demagogues.
Yes, this is true. That's the first demagogue that I didn't realize I was studying, and I thought that the pantomime of Humphrey Appleby was an artifice created for entertainment. What it actually is an accurate depiction as a demagogue of the way that politics runs. And the
only difference I think would be that a real life Humphrey Appleby wouldn't be quite as witty. It's just this humorless he's a miserable, humorless person full of his own importance. Humphrey Appleby's got a bit of self-awareness to him.
To be honest with you, I could see an argument where I would vote for Humphrey Appleby, because in the same way as one of my favorite Formula One drivers was James Hunt, because this is a guy that, you know, gets out of a car, lights up a cigarette, swigs a bottle of whiskey, has 3 girls in his arm, picks up the world championship. It's just like, hell yeah. It's like there's some of the swagger, you know what I mean? And whereas there's other ones like Alain Prost, I felt were, and Michael Schumacher, that were clinical. He's there at 5 a.m. with his engineers, and he's there 4 hours after the race finishes with his engineers. It's like, dude, go out and party, for God's sake. It's like, come on, man.
Well, I mean, in that sense, you know, Boris Johnson, whatever you may say about him, brought a little bit of fun to the.
I think so. I mean, I forget. Bearing in mind my prose about politics is all inside one book called The Dictator's Handbook: Why Bad Behavior is Almost Always Good Politics. So my entire view of politics is dark, start to finish. Anyway, so yes, with that caveat in mind, I mean, geez, Boris Johnson had some personality. I mean, versus David Cameron, you know, it's chalk and cheese. You know, you kind of want your leaders to at least, you know, occasionally jump from a plane, you know, with a parachute, you know, and you know, occasionally, you know, and then when he got done during COVID for having announcing at 2 p.m. that, you know, you can't have more than 2 people at the same place in a social gathering, immediately invited 150 people over to his house to get shit-faced. And it's like, hell yeah, because you're the prime minister. I mean, were it not for people with drones and cameras who would be able to then, you know, photograph it, and then obviously that led to part of the collapse of his entire government. The truth of the matter is that, you know, I kind of admire the swagger, the kind of the personality of it all, but I can see that the whole thing is bullshit in my head. So I'm not hoping that these leaders are going to turn out to stand for what they said they stood for. I know that that's not the case. I've met them. They're completely full of shit. So it's like, I'm not expecting anything. And now I'm not expecting anything. I'm like, be entertaining. At least entertain us.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, you know, for me, when you get someone demagogish in power, that's just the same old thing with the mask ripped off. Yeah. This is just, you know, it's like, yeah, it wasn't that much better before that. We were just blinded. I mean, you know, Boris Johnson can quote Homer in the original. For that, he has my respect. He has my absolute respect. Not many people can do that. And
yeah, I think there's an element of intellect that comes with the classics that I dock my hat to, and I think anyone who is who can really see the structure of arguments, the structure of thoughts, the structure of words, the structure of philosophy, the structure of reason in this particular context of Homer, that is tremendously attractive to me. And I prefer that to, and I'm not under any circumstances, I'm sure that no one here is under any misguiding that I have one particular favorite of political party or another, because evidently I don't. But I prefer that to saying all those people are coming over your back wall and they're going to steal your jobs and rape your family and they're bad. Vote for me. I'll stop them. And it's like, geez, man, it's like, this is the lowest common denominator ad hominem demagoguery. And there's no style to that shit. You know, that's but
then there's the other extreme, that all white people are inherently racist. And I'm like, no. And I know plenty of them that I can confidently say are not racist.
Well, if they like you, then they can't be, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone needs to have an Indian friend.
Oh yes, I'm the token Indian, right? It's the
Listen, I've actually genuinely been booked for speaking gigs in my past because, and I quote, the client has said, we needed to add some diversity to the mix. And I'm like,
All right,
wow.
yeah. That's like the most racist thing you can say to someone who's not. Yeah, especially when you go to literary agents and publishers, and they want you to write something Indian or something ethnic, and it's like, meanwhile, Samantha Harvey can write a novel about 6 people on a space station in space from different nationalities. So how's that not racist? I mean, this whole diversity narrative, it's like, so you want me to create exotic oppression porn for you? And
we still live in a time where I tend not to wear white shirts in restaurants because when I go to the restroom, people hand me their plates. So we think we've evolved in 2025, and I'm not convinced that we're that far. And actually, my evidence really is predominantly from how information is weaponized through politicians, that leans into the what Freud would say is the underlying hatred and anger within us, and when you start coercing using that, and this is a demagogue playbook, is you have this. It's the opposite of critical thinking. Here's an example of when I would become political and I would vote for someone that I believe in. If a politician stood up and said, right, this is what I stand for. I stand for critical thinking. I stand for mindfulness. I stand for respect of each other and love of all living beings. I think I would like to establish breathing exercises and yoga from the youngest possible age, and critical thinking and discourse. I would like to enable us to have a constant bipartisan view and a constant agnostic view of all religions, and learn what love and honoring and cherishing really genuinely can look like and structured like, so that we can be a society that cares more for each other rather than hates more each other. And if someone says that and stands for it and executes it, I'll vote. I'll stand in line. I'll go to the front line for them. But we are nowhere near there. Not in this lifetime or dozens more lifetimes. Nowhere near there.
Well, I think it wasn't Marianne Williamson advocating some stuff like that in America. Some that sort of stuff. She was sort of going in that direction.
In that direction, arguably, Jimmy Carter was going in that direction. There was some, there are times. I mean, hell, I almost thought Barack Obama was going in that direction, and then the unmanned drone strikes in the first 100 days. It's like, oh right, okay, sweet. So actually, you're just the same as I've got it. Cool. Sorry, I just because I figured that we were from the same ancestry. It's like I don't know, some kind of positive discrimination mistake in my head.
Oh
must have thought the same as Sunak, right? So yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, pretty much wrecked the Middle East. That man, Obama.
Yeah, and I got fooled. Yeah. That was the last time that I tried to believe, and that was I think I went from trying to understand how the whole system works. So I learned a lot about the tripartite state of the House and the Senate and the administrative office of the White House. So I looked at how it all worked, and I looked at what he stood for. I looked at his background and read the stuff that he had written and listened to all these talks and everything. And I was like, okay, this might have some kind of progression from the kind of the lineage of the Democrats. And and so I stopped then, and that was a long time ago now. So it's been a while since I followed it with anything other than similar viewership or listenership to Yes Minister or Yes Prime Minister. I watched the politics race in the same way as I listened to those things.
Yeah, no, that would actually be a brilliant thing to binge watch. A flight from London to Sydney. You just binge
I do.
watching Yes Minister and Yes
I
Prime
do.
Minister. Yeah.
I do. Yeah, there's me chuckling in my seat, upsetting all my neighbors because it's. But I think nowadays one could only find that enjoyable if one didn't take the tragedy seriously, which is a weird thing to say, but if you took it seriously and the astonishingly bad decisions that he makes in that, then you can't take it seriously. You have to see it as a comic tragedy, as opposed to a dire reflection of society, of our government, which it actually is.
But I mean, the writing in that show is just brilliant. I think you don't get writing like that these days. I think it's the other one I remember is when Humphrey Appleby's locked out of 10 Downing Street, and you know, that's when the Prime Minister has the upper hand on Humphrey for once, and Humphrey's trying to find new ways of getting in, and
yeah, I think you're right. It's one of those rare moments where there's a power shift, because beforehand the power shift is very obviously the other way around. And I feel for the PM, actually. In those times, I feel for the PM. I have this sympathy of the underdog, because he is the underdog. He's being manipulated.
Absolutely, yeah. But, you know, pertinent things are said about Israel and Palestine and all these things which are still relevant to this day and age.
That's right. And this is the dire reflection of the reality of the present time that we're in. That's exactly what it is. It all matters. Now, listen, I've got to go. Prashant, this has been a wonderful chat. We went into all different manner of topics, which we tend to do. And for those who are listening, we're waiting for more of a instruction manual on the importance of the Socratic method. I hope we gave enough content that was on topic, but that's the beauty of the fast forward button. So for anyone who missed that, then go backward and pause. But Prashant, let's do this again, and we'll pick a new topic. And you're always welcome in this studio.
Absolutely, always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks, buddy.